Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
I found the hidden ring. Have you ever picked up an object that looked ordinary, only to realize a few seconds later it might change everything you believed about the person sleeping beside you? That is exactly what happened to me on a quiet Saturday morning in my home in the United States. I was not looking for a secret. I was not searching for evidence. I was only trying to clean a forgotten corner of the house before my children came home. But hidden inside an old wooden box, wrapped in a faded white cloth, was a ring that did not belong where I found it. The first question that filled my mind was simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. Who hid it? If you enjoy slow, clear English stories with real emotions, stay with me until the end. Because every sentence in this story is connected to the answer. My name is Emma, and this is my story. I have lived an ordinary life for many years. My husband and I work hard. We laugh with our children around the dinner table. We drink coffee together before the day begins. From the outside, everything looks peaceful. Our neighbors smile when they see us walking the dog in the evening. Friends often tell us we are the kind of couple everyone hopes to become one day. I believe that too. At least I didn't till that morning. The weather was cool. Soft sunlight came through the kitchen window. I decided to organize the storage cabinet because it had become a place where forgotten things quietly disappeared. Old photo albums, holiday decorations, children's school projects, boxes that had not been opened in years. Then I noticed something unusual. Behind a stack of dusty books sat a tiny wooden box. I had never seen it before. It was too clean to be old, but too hidden to be accidental. My heart did not race immediately. I was simply curious. I opened it. Inside was a beautiful gold ring. Not my wedding ring. Not any piece of jewelry I remembered buying. It was elegant, simple, expensive. Someone had carefully wrapped it as if it mattered. For several long seconds, I just stared. Then a strange feeling slowly settled into my chest. My husband had never mentioned another ring. I checked the inside. There was a small engraving. Just 2 letters. E and M. I stopped breathing for a moment. My name begins with E. His name begins with M. But this was not our wedding ring. I tried to laugh at myself. Maybe it belonged to a relative. Maybe it was an old family keepsake. Maybe I was creating a mystery where none existed. Psychologists often explain that when people discover incomplete information, the brain automatically tries to fill the missing pieces. It is called pattern seeking. Sometimes it protects us. Sometimes it creates fear where there is none. Sitting alone on the living room floor, I remembered reading that uncertainty activates the same stress systems that respond to real danger. Suddenly, I understood exactly how that feels. I picked up the ring again. It felt warm in my hand. That made no sense. I placed it back inside the cloth. Then I heard the garage door opening. My husband was home. For one brief second, I wanted to ask him immediately, "Whose ring is this?" The words almost escaped my mouth, but something stopped me. Instead, I quietly placed the wooden box exactly where I had found it. I smiled as he walked into the kitchen. He smiled back. Nothing looked different. Nothing sounded different. Yet everything felt different. During lunch, I watched him more carefully than I ever had before. Was he nervous? Was he avoiding eye contact? Or was I simply imagining things? He talked about work. He laughed with the children. He even asked me about our plans for Sunday. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets hide behind the most ordinary conversations. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the ring. Why hide it instead of putting it in a safe? Why wrap it so carefully? Why never tell me it existed? I opened my phone and searched for a simple phrase. Hidden ring meaning. The results were endless. Secret gifts, family traditions, lost jewelry, affairs, unexpected surprises. Every answer seemed possible. Every answer scared me a little more. As someone who practices English every day, I have learned that simple sentences often carry the deepest emotions. I found a ring. I don't know why.
I'm afraid.
Those are easy words, but together, they can completely change someone's life. I had no idea that finding one hidden ring would lead me to discover something even more shocking than the ring itself. And when I finally learned who had hidden it, I almost wished I had never opened that little wooden box. My perfect life wasn't perfect. If someone had taken a photo of my family that evening, everyone would have believed we were living a perfect American dream. My husband laughed while setting the table. My children argued over dessert in the sweetest way possible. I smiled at all the right moments. But hidden behind that smile was one secret that no one else could see. Just a few feet away, inside a forgotten cabinet, a mysterious ring waited in silence. I had not asked a single question yet, but somehow it already felt as though the ring was asking questions about my marriage instead. I wanted to believe I was overthinking everything. After all, life in our home had always followed a comfortable rhythm. Mornings began with fresh coffee and quiet conversations before work. Evenings ended with family dinners, homework, and movie nights on the couch. We were not perfect, but we were steady. In today's busy life across the United States, people often say consistency is one of the greatest signs of a healthy relationship. I believed that. I still wanted to believe it, yet something inside me had changed. I started noticing tiny details that had never mattered before. My husband checked his phone and smiled for a second before putting it face down. He stayed in the garage a little longer after coming home. One afternoon, he quietly moved the same wooden box to another shelf while thinking no one was watching. Maybe he was simply organizing. Maybe it meant absolutely nothing. But when trust is shaken, even ordinary actions begin to look like clues. That realization scared me more than the ring itself. Researchers often explain that our brains naturally focus on possible threats when something feels uncertain. Once doubt appears, confirmation bias quietly takes over. We begin collecting evidence that supports our fears while ignoring everything that suggests we are safe. I caught myself doing exactly that. Every small moment became another puzzle piece, even though I had no pictures showing what the puzzle actually looked like. So, I made a promise to myself. I would not accuse. I would observe. That night I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes while my husband dried the plates beside me. The silence felt heavier than usual. I almost reached for the hidden question. Do you have something to tell me? Instead, I asked whether he wanted more coffee. He smiled. Maybe later. His answer was completely normal. Still, my heart refused to relax. The next morning, after everyone left the house, I walked back to the cabinet. The wooden box was still there. I opened it once more. The ring reflected the morning sunlight so brightly that I almost closed the lid again. Then I noticed something I had somehow missed before. Under the white cloth was a tiny folded piece of paper. My hands froze. I could not remember seeing it yesterday. Had it always been there? Or had someone placed it there overnight? For several seconds, I simply stared at it without touching it. Sometimes not knowing feels safer than knowing. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Very slowly, I unfolded the note. It contained only 4 handwritten words. Not until Friday night. No name. No date.
No explanation.
Just those 4 words. Friday. Today was only Tuesday. Why Friday? What was supposed to happen then? Was someone planning to give the ring away? Was it meant for another woman? Or was I about to ruin a beautiful surprise by discovering it too early? I suddenly realized something else. My birthday was months away. Our wedding anniversary was not close either. There was no obvious reason for a hidden gift. I slipped the note back exactly as I had found it. Then I heard a sound behind me. The front door unlocked. Someone had come home much earlier than expected. I quickly closed the box, pushed it back behind the books, and tried to calm my breathing. Footsteps slowly crossed the hallway. They stopped just outside the storage room. And then, without saying a single word, someone gently turned the doorknob. Every small clue hurt. The person standing outside the storage room was not who I expected. It was my teenage daughter. She looked at me for a second, smiled, and asked if she could borrow a roll of wrapping paper for a school project. I laughed with relief, but only on the outside. Inside, my heart was pounding so loudly that I could barely hear my own voice. For one frightening moment, I had truly believed my husband had caught me searching through the hidden box. That feeling stayed with me long after my daughter walked away, because I suddenly realized something much more unsettling. If I was already hiding the truth from my own family, what was this mysterious ring slowly turning me into? I closed the cabinet carefully and carried the wrapping paper to the kitchen. Everything looked ordinary again. The afternoon sunlight filled the living room. A delivery truck stopped across the street. My neighbor waved while walking her dog. It was another peaceful day in our quiet American neighborhood, yet my mind refused to enjoy any of it. Every ordinary sound seemed to disappear behind one endless question. Who hid the ring? I tried to distract myself with work, but my thoughts kept returning to the tiny note. Not until Friday night. Those 4 words echoed inside my mind again and again. Friday was getting closer. I wondered if I should simply wait. Maybe every answer would appear naturally. But another part of me feared that waiting might allow something irreversible to happen. That evening my husband arrived home carrying grocery bags. He looked cheerful, almost unusually cheerful. As we unpacked everything together, I noticed something strange. He had bought my favorite dark chocolate, fresh flowers, and an expensive bottle of sparkling juice our family usually saved for special occasions. I forced myself to smile. Is something happening this week? I asked as casually as possible. He looked at me for half a second before answering.
No.
I just thought it would be nice. His answer sounded believable. Yet something about the tiny pause before he spoke quietly settled into my memory. Psychologists often explain that when trust begins to weaken, our brains become highly sensitive to pauses, facial expressions, and body language. Most of the time, these signals mean nothing at all. But uncertainty gives ordinary moments extraordinary weight. I could almost feel my own mind collecting invisible evidence that might not even exist. Later that night, I sat alone with a cup of tea. To calm myself, I returned to one of my favorite habits, reading simple English aloud. Slow reading has always helped me organize my thoughts. Short sentences are easier to understand, easier to pronounce, and strangely easier to believe. I can stay calm. I can wait. I need the truth. I whispered each sentence slowly. For a few peaceful minutes, my breathing became steady again. Then, everything changed. My husband received a phone call. He looked at the screen. Instead of answering in front of me, he quietly stepped outside onto the back patio. That had never been his habit. The glass door was almost closed, but I could still see him. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face looked serious. He spoke softly enough that I couldn't hear the conversation. After less than a minute, he ended the call and remained standing outside, staring into the dark backyard as if thinking about something important. When he came back inside, I pretended to keep reading. He looked directly at me for just a second. Then he asked, "Everything okay?" I answered too quickly. Of course. Neither of us believed my answer. The next morning, after he left for work, I decided to do something I had promised myself I would never do. I walked into his home office. I wasn't looking for proof of betrayal. At least, that is what I kept telling myself. I opened one drawer. Nothing unusual. The second drawer contained receipts, pens, and old notebooks. The third drawer stopped halfway. Something inside blocked it. I reached in carefully. My fingers touched a small velvet jewelry pouch, the same deep blue color as the cloth inside the hidden wooden box. My heart began racing again. Very slowly, I pulled it toward me. Before I could open it, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into our driveway. My husband had returned home, and, according to the clock on the wall, he was 3 hours early. I almost destroyed my family. The moment I heard the garage door opening 3 hours earlier than usual, I felt trapped. My hands were shaking. I was standing inside my husband's home office, holding a dark blue velvet jewelry pouch that I had no right to touch. In just a few seconds, I had become the person I never wanted to be. I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. I was chasing my fear. Looking back now, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest danger to a marriage is not a hidden secret. It is the story we secretly create before we know the facts. I pushed the pouch back into the drawer so quickly that it almost fell behind the files. My heart pounded as I closed everything exactly the way I had found it. I walked into the hallway just as the front door opened. My husband stepped inside, carrying his laptop. He looked surprised to see me. "I forgot an important document," he said with a tired smile. I nodded naturally, hoping he could not hear how fast I was breathing. I was just cleaning. Those 4 words sounded harmless. But they were not completely true. He disappeared into his office for less than a minute before walking back out. For one terrifying moment, I wondered if he had noticed that something had been moved. He looked at me, smiled gently, kissed my forehead, and left again without saying another word. Only after his car disappeared down the street did I realize I had been holding my breath. I sat alone on the living room sofa, feeling more exhausted than after an entire day of work. I had found no answers. Instead, I had collected more questions, more guilt, and more suspicion. None of them made me feel stronger. That afternoon, I met my closest friend, Rachel, at a quiet coffee shop. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "You don't look like yourself." For a few seconds, I almost told her everything. The hidden ring, the mysterious note, the velvet pouch, the strange phone call. Instead, I stopped. In the United States, people often encourage open conversations about relationships, but I also knew another important lesson. Once private doubts leave your mouth, they can never truly be taken back. If I was wrong, I would have invited another person into a problem that might not even exist. So I simply smiled. "I'm just tired." Rachel accepted my answer, but I could tell she didn't believe it. On the drive home, I kept thinking about trust. Relationship experts often explain that healthy marriages are built through communication instead of assumption. That sounds simple until fear quietly takes control. Fear is incredibly persuasive. It whispers that imagination is evidence. It convinces us that silence must be hiding guilt. Without realizing it, I had started treating my husband like someone on trial. Every delayed text message became suspicious. Every unexpected smile looked rehearsed. Every ordinary moment felt carefully planned. The worst part was that none of this came from facts. It came from my own imagination. That evening, our family gathered for dinner. The children laughed about school. My husband joked about accidentally burning his lunch at work. Everyone else seemed relaxed.
Except me.
Then something unexpected happened. My youngest son looked at his father and innocently asked, "Dad, Are we still doing it on Friday? The room became completely silent. My husband answered almost immediately.
Yes.
Nothing more. Just one word. Friday. Again. My hands tightened around my fork. Was my son talking about the same Friday written on the hidden note? Or was it something completely unrelated? I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand an explanation. Instead, I stayed quiet. After dinner, my husband walked outside to take out the trash. I watched him through the kitchen window. He reached into his jacket pocket. He looked around carefully. Then he pulled out his phone. A few seconds later, he smiled while reading a message. Not a polite smile. Not a casual smile. A deeply emotional one. The kind of smile I had not seen in weeks. My stomach dropped. At that moment, every fear inside me came rushing back. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly walked past the kitchen. Something on the counter caught my attention. It was a folded receipt. I almost ignored it, but one line printed near the bottom froze me where I stood. Custom jewelry design. Order confirmed. Below, it was today's date. And underneath that, a pickup appointment. Friday, 7 p.m. The truth was stranger than I expected. The receipt changed everything, and at the same time, it explained nothing. A custom jewelry order. A pickup scheduled for Friday at 7 p.m. The exact same night mentioned in the mysterious note hidden beneath the ring. My heart wanted to believe this was finally the answer. But another part of me whispered something far more dangerous. What if the hidden ring and the new jewelry order were connected, but not for me? That single thought followed me everywhere, turning every quiet moment into another impossible question I was desperate to answer. I carefully folded the receipt exactly the way I had found it and placed it back on the kitchen counter. My husband never mentioned it the next morning. He poured coffee into my favorite mug, smiled warmly, and kissed my cheek before leaving for work as if nothing unusual existed between us. His kindness almost made me feel guilty for doubting him. Almost. Because every time I remembered the hidden ring, the note, and the receipt, my confidence disappeared again. The next 2 days passed painfully slowly. Thursday felt longer than an entire week. I try to stay busy by cleaning the house, helping the children with homework, and taking evening walks through our quiet neighborhood. Families laughed in nearby backyards. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. Everything around me reminded me how fragile ordinary happiness can be. From the outside, every home looked peaceful. But I had learned that every family carries stories invisible to everyone else. That evening, while organizing old photo albums, I found a picture from our 10th wedding anniversary. We looked genuinely happy. My husband was holding my hand so tightly that I could almost remember how safe I had felt that day. I suddenly wondered something that had never crossed my mind before. What if he was carrying a burden alone because he wanted to protect me? The human brain naturally jumps toward worst-case scenarios when information is incomplete. Researchers often describe this as a survival instinct. Long ago, expecting danger helped people stay alive. Today, the same instinct can quietly damage relationships if fear becomes stronger than communication. I realized I had spent days collecting evidence against my husband. I had collected almost nothing in his defense. Friday finally arrived. All morning I watched the clock. By afternoon I could barely focus on anything. At dinner my husband seemed unusually relaxed. The children were excited about the weekend. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. At exactly 6:15 p.m., my husband stood up and reached for his car keys. "I have to pick something up," he said casually. "I won't be long." My heart immediately recognized the time. The jewelry appointment. 7 p.m. The words printed on the receipt echoed inside my mind. Without thinking, I made the worst decision of my entire marriage. 5 minutes after he left, I quietly took my own car and followed him. I stayed several vehicles behind, praying he would never notice. The streets were busy with Friday evening traffic. Red brake lights stretched across the road like a river of glowing stars. After 20 minutes, he turned into a small shopping district. I watched him park. Then he walked toward a jewelry store. Everything inside me collapsed. So it was true. The receipt had been real. I remained inside my car, unable to move. Through the large front windows, I could see him speaking with an older employee. The employee disappeared into the back room. A minute later, he returned carrying a small black jewelry box. My husband opened it. Even from a distance, I could see something sparkling inside. He smiled. Then, to my complete surprise, both of them laughed. Not politely, genuinely. The employee shook his hand. My husband carefully placed the small box inside his jacket pocket before leaving the store. I felt tears filling my eyes. Every terrible possibility rushed through my mind at once. Another woman. A secret engagement. A hidden life. I almost started the engine to drive away forever. But then something happened that made no sense at all. Instead of driving toward home, my husband drove to the old community park where our family had celebrated birthdays for years. He parked near the empty playground. He looked around carefully. Then he walked toward the giant oak tree in the center of the park. He knelt down beside one of its roots. And slowly, he began digging into the ground with his bare hands. The hidden reason. Watching my husband kneel beneath that giant oak tree was more frightening than finding the hidden ring itself. Nothing about the scene made sense. It was Friday evening. The park was nearly empty. The sky was turning orange as the sun disappeared behind the trees. And there he was, digging into the ground with his bare hands as if he already knew exactly where something had been buried. At that moment, every terrifying story my imagination had invented suddenly felt real. I almost stepped out of my car. I almost shouted his name. But something deep inside me whispered, "Wait just a little longer." I stayed hidden behind a row of parked cars, barely breathing. The wind carried the sound of children laughing somewhere across the park, but near the old oak tree everything felt strangely quiet. My husband carefully brushed away the loose soil. Then he stopped. He reached into the small hole and slowly pulled out a metal container about the size of a lunchbox. It looked old. Its edges were scratched. He smiled with visible relief. For a second, I thought I was about to discover the truth behind every secret of the past week. Instead, something even stranger happened. He didn't open it. He simply wiped the dirt away, placed it gently into a backpack, looked around once more, and walked back to his car.
I said frozen.
Now there were two mysteries. The hidden ring and the buried box. Neither one had an explanation. As I followed him home from a safe distance, guilt slowly began replacing fear. What was I doing? This was not who I was. For days I had secretly searched drawers, followed my husband across town, and built an entire courtroom inside my own mind without allowing him to defend himself once. Relationship counselors often remind couples that assumptions grow fastest in silence. The less we communicate, the louder our imagination becomes. Looking back, I could almost see that happening inside me in real time. When we arrived home, he acted completely normal. He greeted the children, helped set the dinner table, asked everyone about their day. The backpack was nowhere to be seen. Later that evening, after everyone had gone upstairs, I quietly walked into the garage. I wasn't searching for evidence anymore. At least, that was what I wanted to believe. Near the workbench stood the same backpack. It was partially unzipped. I stared at it for several seconds. Every lesson about trust told me to walk away. Every unanswered question pulled me closer. Finally, I reached inside. The metal container was still there. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of old photographs, birthday cards, movie tickets, tiny handwritten notes, our children's first drawings, hospital bracelets from the day each child was born. My eyes filled with tears. This wasn't another family story. It was ours. Everything inside belonged to us. Then I noticed an envelope resting beneath the photographs. Across the front, written in my husband's handwriting, were 4 simple words. For Emma. Open Friday. My name. I could barely breathe. Was this why he had hidden the ring? Was everything actually connected? For the first time since finding the wooden box, hope quietly returned. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Maybe this entire week had been leading towards something beautiful instead of something heartbreaking. Then I heard footsteps inside the house. I quickly closed the container and returned it to the backpack exactly as I had found it. Before leaving the garage, I looked back one last time. Something shiny caught my attention near the bottom corner of the backpack. It wasn't the black jewelry box from the store. It wasn't the gold ring from the wooden box. It was another ring. Silver. Smaller. And attached to it was a tiny handwritten tag. I could read only 3 words before someone opened the garage door. From our daughter. We chose to heal together. 3 words changed the direction of my entire story. From our daughter. I stood completely still, staring at the tiny handwritten tag attached to the silver ring. In one heartbeat, every accusation I had silently built against my husband began to collapse. But a new question rose even faster. If my daughter was somehow connected to the rings, why had everyone kept the secret from me? And more importantly, what had they been trying so hard to protect? I quickly stepped away from the backpack just as the garage door opened. It was my husband.
He smiled when he saw me.
I thought I heard someone out here. For a second, I almost confessed everything. I almost admitted that I had searched the cabinet, opened the wooden box, read the note, followed him to the jewelry store, watched him dig beneath the oak tree, open the metal container. Every truth was sitting on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I simply smiled. I couldn't sleep. He walked closer and gently placed his hand over mine. Tomorrow will be a special day, he said softly. That's all I can tell you. Then he kissed my forehead and walked back into the house. Not once did he look worried. Not once did he act guilty. For the first time in days, I saw the man I had fallen in love with instead of the stranger my imagination had created. That night, I barely slept. Fear had slowly transformed into curiosity. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine and unusually cool air. Our children woke up earlier than normal. They whispered together in the kitchen before I came downstairs. The moment I entered the room, everyone suddenly became quiet. Normally, that would have made me suspicious again. This time, it simply made me smile. Maybe surprises really do require silence. Around noon, my husband suggested we drive to the same community park. The weather is perfect, he said. The old oak tree immediately flashed through my mind. I nodded without asking any questions. The drive felt strangely peaceful. We listened to soft music. Our youngest son tried to guess the names of every bird he saw outside the window. My daughter kept smiling every time she looked at me. I noticed it now. Not a nervous smile. An excited one. Sometimes our minds see danger simply because we expect danger. Psychologists often explain that expectation shapes perception. When we anticipate betrayal, ordinary events begin to resemble evidence. But when we allow room for trust, the exact same events can reveal kindness instead. I realized I had experienced both versions of reality within the same week. When we arrived at the park, my husband asked me to close my eyes. I laughed. "You know I hate surprises." "I know," he answered, "but trust me." Those two words carried more meaning than ever before. Trust me. I slowly closed my eyes. I heard footsteps moving across the grass, children whispering, someone quietly laughing, then complete silence. A few seconds later, my husband gently took my hand. "You can open your eyes now." I did. The old oak tree looked completely different. Tiny family photographs hung from its lower branches. White ribbons moved gently in the afternoon breeze. Small handwritten notes surrounded the trunk. Our children stood beside my husband, smiling through happy tears. Then my daughter stepped forward. She was holding the silver ring. "The first ring," she said softly, "was mine." I looked at her in complete confusion. She smiled. "I wanted to help Dad make today unforgettable." My husband reached into his pocket and removed the black jewelry box from the jewelry store. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was not an engagement ring. It was my own wedding ring, beautifully restored. The tiny scratches collected over years of marriage had disappeared. It looked exactly as it had on the day he first placed it on my finger. Tears filled my eyes before I could speak. Then my husband quietly said something I never expected to hear. "There's one part of the story that you still don't know." He looked toward our daughter. She nodded. Then she reached into her backpack and carefully pulled out the old wooden box where this entire mystery had begun. "I was the one," she whispered. "I hid the ring." My daily life changed forever. The words, "I hid the ring," did not make me angry. They broke me in a completely different way. For an entire week, I had been chasing a mystery that I believed would expose betrayal. Instead, I was standing beneath an old oak tree in an American park, surrounded by my family, realizing that the greatest secret in my house had been created out of love. But before I could forgive anyone else, I had to face the hardest truth of all. I had to forgive myself. I looked at my daughter, and tears rolled down her cheeks before she could say another word. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "Dad wanted to surprise you. I thought hiding your ring for a few days would make the moment more special. I never imagined it would hurt you like this." For several seconds, nobody spoke. The breeze gently moved the ribbons hanging from the tree, and somewhere nearby, children laughed on the playground. It was strange how life continued so normally while my entire heart was being rearranged. My husband stepped closer. "When your ring needed to be restored, I didn't want you to worry. You always notice when it's missing." We talked about buying a temporary ring, but our daughter had another idea. She wanted this surprise to become a memory our family would never forget. I slowly looked at the restored wedding ring resting inside the small black jewelry box. It was beautiful. The tiny scratches from years of cooking, gardening, helping with school projects, carrying grocery bags, and holding our children's hands had disappeared. For a moment, I almost wished those little marks were still there. They were proof that our marriage had lived a real life. My husband smiled as if he understood exactly what I was thinking. "The jeweler asked if I wanted every mark removed," he said. I told him to leave one. He pointed to the inside of the band. There it was. One tiny scratch. Almost invisible. "That one happened during our first family camping trip," he said. I couldn't erase it. I laughed through my tears. Only then did I truly understand. The ring had never been the real treasure. The memories were. Relationship experts often say that healthy marriages are not built by avoiding problems. They are strengthened by repairing misunderstandings before they become permanent walls. Looking back, I realized my greatest mistake had not been finding the hidden ring. It had been allowing silence to become louder than trust. That afternoon we stayed in the park for hours. The children shared every detail of their secret plan. My daughter admitted she had written the note saying, "Not until Friday night." My youngest son proudly confessed that he had accidentally almost revealed everything during dinner. Everyone laughed. Even I laughed. For the first time all week, the laughter felt completely real. Later that evening, after we returned home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the living room window. The house felt different. Not because anything had changed physically, because I had changed. As part of my daily English practice, I opened my notebook and slowly wrote 3 simple sentences. Trust takes time. Fear tells stories. Love tells the truth. Simple English. Simple words. But they carried the biggest lesson I had learned in years. I thought the story had finally reached its happy ending. I was wrong. Just before bedtime, my daughter quietly knocked on my bedroom door. She looked nervous again. "Mom," she said softly, "there's something Dad still doesn't know." My smile disappeared. She reached into her pocket and carefully placed a tiny silver key in my hand. "I found this inside the wooden box," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to be there." What this ring really taught me. Just when I believed every secret had finally been revealed, my daughter quietly placed a tiny silver key into my hand and whispered, "Dad doesn't know about this." My heart froze again. The hidden ring had already taken me through fear, guilt, hope, and forgiveness. Now a single key threatened to open another mystery. I stared at it under the soft bedroom light, wondering whether I should tell my husband immediately, or whether this little piece of metal belonged to a story that none of us had expected. My daughter sat beside me on the edge of the bed. "I found it tucked inside the lining of the wooden box," she explained. "It must have slipped into a tiny tear in the fabric years ago.
I didn't tell Dad because
I wanted to show you first." I looked closely at the key. It was old, much older than the wooden box itself. There was a tiny engraved number. 17, nothing else. No name.
no logo, no clue.
I smiled gently at my daughter. "This time," I said, "we're not going to build scary stories." She nodded. After everything we had experienced together, we had both learned the same lesson. Questions deserve answers. They do not deserve assumptions. The next morning after breakfast, I showed the key to my husband. He looked genuinely surprised. I've never seen that before. There was no hesitation, no nervous expression, just honest confusion. Instead of creating another week of silence, we made a different decision. We would solve this mystery together. That single choice felt more important than the key itself. For the first time in days, the 3 of us laughed while trying to guess what the tiny key might open. My son confidently declared it belonged to pirate treasure. My daughter insisted it opened an old diary. My husband joked that it probably unlocked a forgotten cookie jar. Even I laughed. The fear that had once filled our home had completely disappeared. That afternoon we searched everywhere. Old drawers, memory boxes, a small cabinet in the hallway. Nothing matched. Finally, my husband looked toward the bookshelf in our family room. "There is one thing we've never opened." Behind several photo albums sat a small wooden keepsake chest that had belonged to my grandmother. I had not touched it in years. The tiny lock looked almost exactly the right size. I slowly inserted the key. It turned smoothly. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside there was no expensive jewelry, no hidden money, no shocking family secret. There were only letters. Dozens of handwritten letters tied together with a blue ribbon. Each envelope had a different date. Some were more than 20 years old. My grandmother had written them throughout her life. One envelope had my name on it. With trembling hands, I opened it. The first sentence immediately filled my eyes with tears. If you are reading this, remember that love grows stronger every time you choose trust over fear. I couldn't speak. My husband quietly squeezed my hand. My daughter leaned against my shoulder. Nobody rushed the moment. Sometimes the greatest treasures are not things we wear. They are words we carry forever. That evening I added another page to my English notebook. Practicing slow English had become more than language learning. It had become a way to slow my thoughts before making painful conclusions. I carefully wrote, listen before judging, trust before fearing, love before leaving. Simple English, simple life lessons, simple words that had rescued my family. As the sun disappeared beyond our backyard, I believed every mystery had finally reached its peaceful ending. Then my husband smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. There is one last surprise, he said. I've been waiting until tonight. He reached into his pocket and slowly placed a small sealed envelope into my hands. Across the front, in his handwriting, were 6 words that made my heart race one final time. Open this on our anniversary. The answer changed my heart. If you have stayed with me until this final chapter, you already know something that changed my life forever. I thought this story was about a hidden ring. Then I thought it was about a hidden secret. In the end, I discovered it was really about something far more dangerous than either of those things. It was about the stories we secretly tell ourselves when we don't have all the facts. 1 week of silence almost convinced me to lose faith in the people who loved me most. And one simple choice to trust instead of assume gave me my family back. The sealed envelope rested quietly in my hands. Across the front, my husband had written only 6 words. Open this on our anniversary. For a second, I smiled. A week earlier, I would have opened it immediately. I would have believed I deserved answers right away. But I was no longer the same person. I gently placed the envelope inside our family memory box beside my grandmother's letters. I'll wait, I said. My husband looked at me with tears in his eyes. That, he whispered, is the greatest gift you could have given me. Several weeks later, our wedding anniversary finally arrived. The house was peaceful. The children had secretly decorated the dining room with photographs from different years of our marriage. There were pictures from birthdays, camping trips, graduations, lazy Sunday mornings, and ordinary evenings that had somehow become extraordinary memories. Nothing looked expensive. Everything looked priceless. After dinner, my husband handed me the envelope again. This time, he smiled. It's ready. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter.
No Yueli.
No money. No legal documents. Just 1 page. As I slowly read each line, tears quietly filled my eyes. He wrote that every scratch on my wedding ring reminded him of a promise we had kept together. He wrote that love was never measured by perfect days, but by the difficult days we chose not to give up. He thanked me for building a home where our children learned kindness before success, honesty before pride, and forgiveness before anger. At the bottom of the page was one final sentence. If I had another lifetime, I would still choose you first. I could not hold back my tears. Neither could he. Our children hugged us without saying a word. Sometimes silence carries more love than the longest conversation. Looking back now, I understand why this story reached so many hearts. The hidden ring was never the real mystery. The greatest mystery was whether fear or trust would win inside my own heart. Thankfully, trust arrived before it was too late. Psychologists often explain that strong relationships are not built because couples never experience doubt. They survive because both people are willing to replace assumptions with honest conversations. That lesson became the greatest treasure our family received, not from the ring, not from the letters, but from everything we experienced together. Even today, I still practice English a few minutes every morning, not because I want perfection, because slow reading reminds me to slow my thinking. Sometimes I quietly repeat 3 simple sentences. I choose trust. I choose love. I choose kindness. Simple English. Simple thoughts. A stronger heart. If this story helps you practice listening, reading, and speaking English, I hope it also reminds you of something even more valuable. Before believing your fears, ask. Before assuming, listen. Before walking away,
Talk.
because sometimes the answer you're searching for has been loving you all along. And if you ever find a hidden ring, remember my story before creating your own ending. Maybe the greatest surprise waiting inside your home is not another secret. Maybe it is another chance to love the people already standing beside you. That's all for today. I'll create many more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next one.